And the sea story, the runner, often gets short shrift. And so we're going to discuss today ways in which you can make better use of the sea story, how the sea story can be more than what you might imagine it as being. And it's going to be educational for me as well, because I've always looked at sea stories, really, to be honest, as like, it's always that moment when we were writing, when we go, oh man, we have two of our stars don't have anything to do at all in this movie. And so you got to create some, they're fighting over gum or something, right? So it's going to be educational for me as well to sit back and learn a little bit about this topic from two, I don't want to embarrass you, masters of the genre, people who've perfected half-hour comedy script writing, and particularly the ability to put a third storyline to fantastic use. So help me welcome to Vancouver two very funny comedy writers, Al Jean and Chris McKenna, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Vancouver.
Glad to be here.
So am I. We're going to do this all night.
I'm gladder.
I will. That's excellent thinking. The logisticizing is mind-numbing. So we're going to, for those of you who don't know who Al and Chris are, let's just talk a little bit. We'll start far. Okay, you hand them. Whoever has the mic. Al, here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're working on, or what you have been working on, how you got into the business, etc. What anything you think these people need to know?
Well, I was a student at Harvard College, and my roommate, Mike Reese, got on the Harvard Lampoon, and through him, I met the funniest, most brilliant people I ever met in my life, and I work with many of them still. At the time, it wasn't an attempt to get a job. It was just a place to be with really great people. And a couple guys got hired out of college to work on Saturday Night Live. It was the first time people I knew actually had real show business jobs. And they recommended us for a job on the movie Airplane 2, the bad one. And then we worked for...
Was that the subtitle to it? The bad one?
Terrible
yeah,
marketing.
and then the log line was, don't go. So, and it still was okay, So then I worked for Johnny Carson and Alf, who are both very similar in their personalities. I landed a job on the show The Simpsons in 1989, mostly because besides Mike and myself, no one wanted to work on it. It was a cartoon. It was 2 days a week in terms of work. And, I thought it was a Jim Brooks show. I love Matt Groening's work, and I thought it would be good. But, of course, nobody dreamed it'd still be going on 25 years later. And I've done other things, created a couple shows, but pretty much I've been at The Simpsons on and off ever since.
Over to you, Chris. We're now all suited up with the three microphones.
I feel
It's
so
like
manly.
the worst version of like one-upsmanship. Like, oh, guess what? I started my television career about 10 years ago. I got a job on a show called American Dad right when it was starting up. And at the time with my youngest brother, we were on that for about 5 years, had a great time, worked with incredible writers, including obviously Seth MacFarlane and Mike Barker and Matt Weissman, the creators, but also people who would go on to great things like Carter and Craig, who created How I Met Your Mother, Nasher Khan, who created Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, Steve Healy, who I believe you know, maybe worked with, I don't know though, Harvard College, they all know each other.
Never met him.
Anyway, just an incredible group of writers, and after about 5 years on that, moved on to a show called Community, created by Dan Harmon, and worked on Community for 3 years, and just had an incredible time on that. And now I am writing for Mindy Kaling's new show, The Mindy Project on Fox.
In color. We always like to end TV shows that way. In color. Well, you both have had a long and varied history on some fantastic shows, and so we're going to dive into this notion of, not just, we're going to talk about several things in regard to putting scripts together, and I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. We're going to, the last, a good chunk of this, last half hour or so of our forum is going to be question and answer. So you can, if you have your questions prepared, or if you don't, start thinking about them now. You'll be able to.
I would say I owe all my professional and personal success to the sea story.
Well, there you go. The importance of the sea story has just been laid down. How would you define the sea story? People have varying definitions. How would you personally define what a C story is or a runner.
Well, usually there's two plots, and it's the old standard shows. You'd have, say one for the lead star and then one for the secondary star, and ideally you'd make them twist up. But then, starting with shows like The Simpsons and Seinfeld, I think people felt that sort of old structure wasn't enough, and that you wanted to have more going on. That there was, people were willing to accept more information and wanted faster pacing. And if they didn't get it, they would tune away. So, or Friends is an example where there'd be 6 people, so that's 3 couples, and then automatically that would dictate a C story. And I think it really started in the 90s, and then now, we would also do act ones that were unrelated to the rest of the show. I think Community had an extremely wide-ranging format, and as does having also goes all sorts of places. And I think, people used to say you couldn't get away with that. Now you can.
But also, you have to realize that there's less time to tell a story now in a half hour of television. I remember listening to a DVD commentary with David Merkin in The Simpsons, and he was watching like this, I think like a season 3 or 4 episode, saying, "Oh, we had to basically get rid of the B stories oftentimes because there's just no time, because they got cut down from like 25 minutes down to like now it's like 21 and a half or 22 minutes. What is it on Fox?"
I think it's even closer to 20 minutes for a 30-minute show of non-commercials.
Yeah.
So it's almost
so now it's
counterintuitive.
just an A story and a C runner. No, it's a very limited B story usually.
It's strange how it developed as we were getting less screen time. The notion was to put more storylines into it. Why do you think that happened so counterintuitively? Because you would think it would be just, okay, cut the B story, we're just A story, we're down to 21 minutes.
I think everything in television is reflecting one fact, is that there are like 500 channels and that people have remote controls. So they're basically saying, give them instant gratification every second or you're going to have them turn away. And another, way that they addressed this was they went to 4 commercial breaks instead of 3, because they found that if you had a longer commercial run, that the middle commercials weren't getting watched. Maybe you'd watch the first one and the last one prior to the show coming back on. But then they would say to us, so now you have like a 2-minute act, and how do you tell a beginning, middle, and end in 2 minutes?
No, honestly, I've just moved over from NBC where we would have 3 acts and then a tag, and now I'm working on Fox, and it's very difficult because I'm used to, as mankind has for hundreds of thousands of years, a beginning, a middle, and end. And now it's a beginning, a middle, and end. Guess what? End part 2. And now we have to, and then there's time limits on those. We have to make sure that each one of our, like the act 3 and 4, which used to be act 3, they each have to be about 4 minutes apiece. So you're now like sort of manufacturing these third
It's like
act
slicing
breaks.
a pizza, and you have to make each slice the same size, and if it gets too small, and I like small slices of pizza. They're,
Yeah, it's
Very manageable.
Believe me.
Damn it, I do.
What, in your opinion, constitutes a good runner? Like if somebody's pitching you a runner, you're working on your script and you got your A story and your B story down, and one of the writers that you work with throws out an idea for a runner. Is there something that you can kind of put your finger on and say that's a good one, versus the guy who pitched just before and you say, maybe not so much? Well,
I just fortunately brought a clip that illustrates my point. So if we could dim the lights, they told me the process takes about 20 minutes.
we got to really front load the lead into the.
Here we go. Okay, a little dimmer.
So just so our tech person knows which
This is the Simpsons clip.
The Simpsons clip.
The
I think
clip,
it's the only.
The clip is shorter than this period before the clip.
That's always when it's great. That's like when you go to YouTube and you want to watch a 15-second video and there's a minute of commercial in front of time. That seems very kind of the end of civilization.
It's a clip from our upcoming Halloween show, and it was.
Those aren't popular at all, are they? Those Simpsons Halloween shows.
They're so popular that even though they air them in November, and now they're airing it like the first week in October, like they still get watched, and it's hard because now I'm afraid people are going to miss seeing them because of the time that they air them. And our whole promotion this fall was their Halloween show's October 7th. You get your Halloween on.
See, I'm afraid that Simpsons Halloween specials are so popular, people will miss Halloween.
Yeah, they're just going to
They'll
forego
think
it.
that they happen. Halloween was October 7th. They go, oh my God, we missed
Didn't
Halloween.
we do
And then
that
they'll forget
already?
about it when the 31st roll.
But Halloween starts on Labor Day now. I mean, all the Halloween outlet stores.
Yes.
This is a very long time to set up a clip, by the way.
You can go ahead. Don't wait for us to stop
Got a
talking.
hamster wheel back there.
Just fire it up, and we'll.
You may be disappointed.
That's what he always says before the lights go out.
Should not have brought my family to this. So if you just play, it should be right at the beginning of the...
That was good. That was all right.
Simpsons does it again.
That's such a like meta joke, you know, to have us all wait.
Halloween episode, the Emperor's New Clip. Wasn't it wonderful?
Well, we assume that it'll come up momentarily and that it will be awesome. I was, you know, the question that led up to this was basically, is there something, if somebody pitches a runner storyline to you, is there a moment when you go, yeah, that would work, that would be great?
Well, usually part of it with me, but it's just that if that was the problem.
Everything is interconnected somehow. We can't run the DVD when he's using microphone B. A limited number of batteries. Is it?
It's like the stones from Temple of Doom. Wait, you? Oh, now we're in the right order. Okay.
Promising?
Come on, you can't look at that infinitely dense little guy and not want to feed it something.
Dad, don't pat it!
Why shouldn't I? You little shut up! Nature's perfect choking machine.
I'm putting a baby gate across the black hole, and don't throw anything more into it. Oh, yes, Homer? Dad, that's creepy.
Sorry. Okay, it's possible someone may have started a business called Magic Crap Hole Waste Removal, but it wasn't me.
Ew.
That's it. So, all it was we just had that joke where his fingers got stretched out, and we thought, you know, cartoons usually when something happens, the person goes back to normal, you never see it again. But if you kept his fingers stretched out for the length of the story, then we just had all these other little visuals that we liked, that we threw in throughout. And to me, that's a C joke.
That's like
my
the
story.
end of the cartoon universe. Once you start doing that kind of reality, you're
Yeah.
cheating the cartoon universe. It's the end of cartoons as we know it. So is there that, did somebody come to you and pitch and say, you know, in terms of that running thing, was it that simple a pitch? Was somebody just said, what if his hand just stayed that way and kept doing weird things?
I just thought we had it stretch for the original joke, and then I just thought, oh, let's just keep it stretched. You know, because in real life, you know, you break your leg, it doesn't unbreak. You know,
Right.
I mean, and that's sort of the theory of The Simpsons is that their people are real, even though cartoon things happen to them, and you explore what happens in a realistic way, and that's why we did it.
What about you, Chris? Is there a moment when you hear somebody talking about, or if you have a thought for a runner that you go, yeah, this would work, this would be really.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Community. When I was on Community, we started to find that it's so much better when it's an umbrella A story, and those became very hard to shoot. But it was just so much more fun to have everyone together playing off of everyone. Did I kill it? Did I kill it? Anyway, but you know, oftentimes there would be those are very difficult to shoot because even though everyone's in the same place, you have to do coverage on seven different individuals, and those. They would go, you got to do A and B stories. You got to do, you know, break them up, and then oftentimes it would be like a Joel McHale A story, and then, you know, like sometimes like a Gillian B story, you know, with Alison Brie, and then you do these C runners occasionally. And I think one of the greatest things we ever did, I think, that Dan Harmon and Hillary Winston came up with was a C runner, which really took on the idea of the narcissism of the A story by telling a C runner that was much juicier than anything that was going on in the episode, and it all took place silently in the background. I don't know if you have that up there. It's
How's it
Abed,
labeled? Yeah.
the Midwife, I think it's called, which I think was a really great way of doing a C runner, which was a much better story than what was going on in the foreground.
It is great if what can traditionally be the storyline that's kind of left in the dust kind of becomes the one that people start.
We're all living
salivating
A
on.
stories. All of our friends are living C runners, and vice versa. So I think like in life, life plays out in grand, amazing ways with our friends and our friends of friends that we're never really a part of. And because we're so focused on, oh, I stubbed my toe. That's the A story of what's going on here because it hurts me. Anyway, this is a. Watch the background.
I waxed, dummy. This is from a blood test.
Oh no, I knew it. Things are going too well for you.
Oh, no, just a physical. Even a Ferrari needs a tune-up. You guys moonshiners now?
No, just the two of them.
We're raising money for the oil spill. Did you even know there was one?
Yeah, I have the AOL homepage bookmarked. Did you even know about the ostrich that raised the tiger cub?
And the pelicans are covered in oil. Everyone likes pelicans. They bring babies.
That's storks.
Right. Well, we still like them.
Millionaire Boys Club. Mind if I ask what happened in class today?
You pulled 40 minutes of anesthesiology out of your ass.
Yeah, I did. But I meant your elderly friend.
Do you know how many times I haven't eaten a donut?
I do not.
How much I got teased in grade school for dabbing my pizza with napkins? I've suffered. I've denied myself because the rules said if I did that, I would live longer. But then, halfway through the game...
We're supposed to fill it with every mistake and miracle we can manage.
Barely saw you this week, I bet. What have you been up to?
How much?
Very funny and very distracting at the same time. That would be my concern if
but,
I was directing.
It was
that.
one of those things that I don't think most people even knew what was going on until someone afterwards posted it on YouTube, and then everyone went back and watched it. It was, as Dan Harmon said, it was just sort of this. Oh, actually, not. It was regarded to in a different episode, actually. But no, it was just this great A story that was going on as a C runner. You know, Abed gets confronted by a girl who has an unwanted pregnancy. The boyfriend gets jealous. It turns into this love triangle. Fight, and then he helps them deliver the baby, and all while this other nonsense with Jeff worried about his mortality because he has high cholesterol in the foreground. Anyway, just a fun use of a C story.
Very it's a brave thing to do, something like that. Because my concern was always
Very accessible. That's why Dan Harmon and I are still making Community.
Yeah, my concern with comedy is always, I don't know, maybe I'm too precious, but it's always like, don't let anything else distract from this one precious joke that we've put forward. I was like, I would get rid of people walking in the background. Can we not have an extra walk? Because he's saying something funny. So to dive in with something like that, I think it's pretty
We
brave.
find when we're doing the Simpson movie that little jokes in the corner, if people could discover them, would actually get bigger laughs. Because I think people thought, oh, I'm clever that I get this. Yeah. And, the trick is that making sure, to somehow flash the arrow saying, look at this. But
Right.
If it works really well.
Aside from the shows that you two have worked on and the shows that you mentioned that kind of started the trend of adding a runner to, are there what examples of shows that that are out there that have done it really well or continue to do it well to really make use of the runner? I know that sometimes it makes it Seinfeld came along. It seems to me like Seinfeld was the first one that really kind of dovetailed storylines on a regular basis. And you said that this was one of the shows that first started using a runner storyline on a regular basis. I'm trying to remember from my own memory, how often did they kind of dovetail all three storylines together? Did they ever do that? Or was it usually just tying the two together and then maybe the tag on the...
I think it's one of those things when you tie the first two together, you're like, all right, we've got a story. And then the third one, and you go, oh my God, it's like a Pluto aligning with Neptune or something. If it happens, it's great, but it's pretty rare. If you want a current one, 30 Rock, I think, is great. There's so many really brilliant things, and every second of that has something great going on.
Are there certain character types out there that lend themselves well to runners? Like, are there characters that are maybe too big, too strong or magnetic characters to really put in a C storyline, or can any character type work in a C storyline?
I like to put Chevy in C runners. That means he's not in the A or the B story.
Personal vendettas aside.
No, it's just maybe he's so dynamite. There's too much that explodes the screen if he's on too much.
That's how you sell it to him.
Yes, I've worked with actors just like that.
Yeah, no. Not to go right into another clip, but it was we did an episode that I wrote last season that was 7 different timelines, and the part of the difficulty of that was not boring everyone over and over and over again. And I used something that was sort of based on my life. My father, the combination of my father and my stepfather. My father, who fought in World War II, and he would look for any excuse to bring up stories about World War II, no matter what, and then would claim it came up organically, and also my stepfather, my father-in-law, who slept with a famous actress on an airplane, and also would like to bring that up all the time. And I combined them together, and we did a runner on remedial chaos theory that was basically Chevy Chase trying to wedge the same salacious story into various ways throughout. Again, I didn't mean to say, if you want to watch that clip, we have it, or we can watch it later. But
I think this is good. We've set it up. We might as well dive into it now.
It's called Eartha Kitt.
I wonder who the celebrity is that he slept with in this clip.
Lieutenant Eartha Kitt of World War II.
The perfect killing machine. Eartha Kitt. What are you drinking, by the way, there? What is that beverage?
Bourbon.
Just straight bourbon, the old Starbucks house brand bourbon.
Yeah, they sell it now.
Pike's Blend bourbon.
I'm moving to Canada.
What are you drinking, Chris?
Empty.
What?
It was definitely not red wine.
That's good. Definitely not red wine. Is it illegal for us to drink in a situation like this?
You can do anything while you're waiting for a clip to start.
Yeah.
The one loophole of the universe.
2, 1, 2. Annie.
Okay, fine. Guess I'm going down.
All this talk of going down. Did you guys know I had sex with Eartha Kitt in an airplane bathroom? Name dropping comes up organically.
We have a pact. We do not enable her baking. It's going to be better for her in the long run.
Hey, you know who got it in the long run? Eartha Kitt when I nailed her in the airplane bathroom.
Oh, cheers.
What? Came up organically. 3, 1, 2, 3. Pierce. Crap. Speaking of crap, I was taking one in an airplane bathroom when Eartha Kitt decided to bang me. What? That's where my mind went. Your mind went years ago. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Britta.
Great.
Great. You know what's great? Air travel. I've flown a lot of airplane stories. I once had sex with Eartha Kitt.
Okay, I'm going to check on my pies.
1, Troy.
Damn it. I'm going to go as fast as I can so I don't miss anything.
You know who I used to call Miss Anything? Eartha Kitt. She totally said it. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll bet.
I'm on it.
You know who else was on it? And you know what it is.
Everybody give me money.
Oh, that's got really softened your personality.
I banged Eartha Kitt. So funny.
Karma.
That guy sucks harder than the toilet in an airplane bathroom.
Airplane bathroom.
Oh, my pies.
I like that you had one that was just audio. You just heard him in the background.
Yes, well.
That cracked me up.
boys stuff plays better off camera.
Next year's forum is just going to be a McKenna Chase fist fight. We're going to have a little
Already happened.
set up a cage. Yeah, but we weren't privy to it.
Or as he calls me,
Eartha Kitt.
no, Doctor. Doctor can't write.
Doctor can't write.
Chevy's wit.
It actually cracked me up. I feel bad now.
Like the best version of me ever seeing my dad set himself up for a World War II story. We were he wanted desperately to talk about it, and he looked up into the sky and said, "Whew, look at those clouds. Look like storm clouds." They didn't. Nothing like the storm clouds over the Aleutian Islands in 1941. I'm like, you just set up yourself for a World War II story. You can't do that.
Using the whole sky. Now, did either your father or your father-in-law recognize themselves in this character, or did you give them a heads up that this was going to maybe be coming their way? An homage?
No. I mean, they see themselves in everything. No, I had a yes. I told them, and now they're both very proud of this, and they have another story to tell.
And Eartha Kitt, did she see it before she died?
No, the reason why we had another actress and we couldn't use that actress because she's still alive, and hence slander. So we had to actually choose a sad, unfortunate, deceased
That seems like such a weird use of the law.
Hey, yeah. Thanks, law. Thanks.
Can we desecrate somebody who's died?
Yes, exactly.
It seems like such a weird thing that the legal system would work in.
A Category 1 lawsuit.
Well, this brings me up to another question that's not specifically series story related, but how often do you find that you pull your storylines from real life? I know that people write in different ways. When I was writing on Corner Gas, I would rarely pull from any kind of life happening or people I know, and there was another writer on there, Kevin White, who almost every one of his storylines was, like, this thing happened on the weekend and I'm going to write a story about it. How do you guys work?
I would say everything is real life, but not necessarily my real life or anybody else's real life.
Well, that's you really covered your ass on that one.
I mean, it started as our real lives, but then, after 500 episodes where all you're doing is just sucking out your life, you run out of things to say. So then you're, reading things. When I worked for Carson, I used to say, you'd read about the inventor of the Zamboni died, and you'd go, oh, thank God, this will give us material. So then you just kind of like find things that you think are, like, we did a show about people coming to Canada because prescription drugs were cheaper, and then Homer and Mr. Burns set up an under-the-table exporting operation, and they came from the truth that does happen.
Yeah. Just on a sidebar, have you ever encountered this in your writer's room? This will always happen. You'd think you'd come up with a great storyline, and then inevitably somebody would go, The Simpsons did that. It's like almost every conceivable comedic notion you could think of, somebody goes, oh, they did that in The Simpsons. You guys you've done it all. You've done all the great comedy.
Well, they say it to each other.
No, and this year, actually, we killed one because American Dad had done it. We were going to have that black hole was going to turn into the Little Shop of Horrors, and Kevin Michael Richardson was going to sing, and then you guys had done it with a hot tub. Not done it with a hot tub. Done that story with a hot tub. So,
everyone was confused until you explained that.
Yeah, so we didn't do it because American Dad. It was pretty the way they went with it was pretty similar to what we were gonna do.
But what you're talking about, I mean, like Simpsons had done everything to the point where 10 years ago, South Park was making a story about Simpsons did it. I mean, it's become. Yes, the Simpsons have done everything, and they've done it amazing, and sometimes they've done it 3 times, amazingly, right?
In the same episode.
No, but haven't you? I mean, like,
no,
you guys are like, oh, okay, like, it's tough. I think anything, it's like, oh, Marge having a midlife crisis or being unhappy and trying to start, move away from the family. I'm sure you guys have done that a million times.
Yeah, and you try to find it. Well, like we have one that's coming up where. I heard about this website, Ashley Madison, where married people go on it. So I thought, oh, that'd be interesting if Marge thinks it's Dolly Madison, the cupcake website she's getting for Homer. But you need some new into it so that it's not the same story, but it does evoke the same emotions.
Yeah.
Have you ever just decided you had to abandon a runner because it just wasn't kind of? I guess we can say this for any of the storylines, A, B, or C, where it's just. it's just not gelling. It's just not working. When you first hear of it, or you first hear the idea, or first think of the idea, you're all excited and you start pounding it out. Specifically, let's talk about the sea story. Have you ever just kind of thought, this isn't?
There's even a term for this happening. It's called the Nakamura.
Yeah.
I don't know what show it started on. I think it was.
I think it was at Rhoda. I think it was Rhoda.
I think it was a Jim Brooks show. I mean, when during the golden days of half-hour sitcoms, and there was something where the punchline was Nakamura, and they were so sure it was going to kill.
Nakamura.
That they had it like 8 times in the script, and the first time you hear Mr. Nakamura, that just crickets, dead, and then everyone's doing at the taping, and they're going, "Oh my God, we've got to like go to this well." And so Jim, whatever he was telling me about it, he was like, the actors like were almost going to revolt the last time and knock him out for the scene.
Yeah, because there's always lingo in writers' room, like, oh, the shorthand for let's not do that. And like you said, it's Nakamura.
Yeah.
Off of, I think it was a Rhoda episode where it was like, oh, that joke died. And sometimes like you fall in love with ideas in the room, like, oh, because usually sea stories are just like runners of like, oh, gag. And you're like, oh, you can do this gag, or now they're dressed as women, and now they're like trying on different costumes. And yeah, and then you get to that point where like, oh, we're just playing the same beat over and over and over again. That's why I feel like sometimes the best sea runners are ones that have a beginning, a middle, and end, I mean, so they're not just like, you're not playing the same joke over and over and over again. There's a little twist to it. There's a little like arc to it. There's like anything, a great story has a beginning, a middle, and end. It's not just the same joke being repeated over 3 or 4 acts.
There's also the sea story. The runner can also be used, I find, effectively to collapse time. Have you ever had a sea story develop? I'm thinking of one of the scripts that we did where, we didn't start out writing the script of the sea story in mind, but it was a story where we had to keep kind of collapsing time and jumping ahead. And my character in the show had just had a haircut, and so what we did was we kept kind of to collapse time or to start scenes abruptly. We had my character in mid-conversation about how his new haircut made him seem faster. That was his thing. So we just kept going to that, and it became a very effective tool that we ended up using over and over. Have you ever used it as just a way to kind of, you got to get from point A on the timeline down the road? Just use it. No? Have I revolutionized television as we know it?
I know only one similar story, and it's nothing I ever did. It was this play Once in a Lifetime by Kaufman and Hart, which they couldn't get it working, and it was really funny, but something was screwed up. It was about a guy trying to sell a movie in Hollywood. And then somebody said, why don't you just have one scene that's not like big and full of showbiz, but just 2 people sitting on a train explaining what's happened and what's going to happen. And that scene turned it into a smash. And it is funny, just sometimes people want like something explained to them clearly. There's another one that used Jim Brooks as a reference, is when they did the Mary Tyler Moore pilot, he said famously, people hated Rhoda, hated the character, and it almost ruined the whole show. So they put in the little girl and had her say, I like Rhoda. And they'd go, why do you like Rhoda? She goes, I like Rhoda. And then Rhoda's testing went up.
Wow.
And that saved the show.
We are so easily manipulated. It
Yeah.
kind of saddens me and fills me with hope somehow as a producer.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, totally true.
I mean, off of that, apparently, people did not like Britta in Community in the beginning of the first season. They just felt like, oh, I think it was actually Hillary Winston, one of the writers on the early she wrote on it for 2 seasons, but she was there in the very beginning. She's like, I wouldn't go shopping with this girl. She told Dan Harmon, and instead of Dan trying to make the character likable, he Charlie Browned her. He just said, make the other women not like her, not want to hang out with her, and it became this great tool of like, it was like the Shirley character and the Annie character not wanting to go with Britta to the bathroom because she wasn't a good girl to go to the bathroom with. It was a very small story very early on, but it really then it almost like de-Rhodaized her in terms of like, oh, you're hanging a lantern on the fact that, oh, this is like a character that people don't like, particularly women don't like, and I think that makes her likable.
That's a great example of finding things out about characters through, the runner or any storyline. I always like that moment when you're kind of writing and you write something that you didn't know about the character. Like I remember one of the lines writing when the character said, somebody referenced Jaws, and the character said, oh, that's one of my favorite movies. This is kind of an innocuous type of line, but when you come up with something like that, it gives you a little insight into the character all of a sudden. You go, well, that's strange. I wouldn't think that she was a big fan of Jaws. Do you have examples of that, of like as you were going along, maybe with characters that you've written for years and years, or numerous episodes where you kind of learn a little something about the character?
This is again not something that happened to me, but I've heard of characters where the creator had no clue. Like on The Sopranos, Big Pussy was incredibly popular, and David Chase, I guess, wasn't aware after the first season. And then, you had like a little story, and people on the staff said, you've got to make it a big deal. Everybody loves him. And you can completely, not be aware of how something is going to play. Like Urkel, when he was on Family Matters, it was a complete shock. It was just this one guy who came in for one show and was so overwhelmingly popular, he became the star of the show.
Yeah, I guess you just never know when you're putting it together who people are going to respond to. We had the same thing with Corner Gas. Was initially, like, we ended up with 8 main characters that we were trying to, and it's when we really started working C stories a lot, was we ended up having 8 main characters, because we came to the realization that anytime we gave one of the characters who were initially kind of, we kind of had top 4 and bottom 4, those bottom 4 characters people responded to way more than you think, and then you just end up writing more and more for them. If you cast it well, everybody can step up to the plate and hit a home run. You kind of got to utilize them all.
And I have to admit, I was in a bet that I was going to use Big Pussy and Urkel in the same examples.
That is awesome. And it was so naturally. It was like it came up organically, like a World War II sex story. I love it.
God, I want to see a runner with those two. Or Stephen Urkel. Big Pussy. They would hang together pretty well.
They would. They would be that strange pairing of characters that you wouldn't think would hook up. Come here, you nut. Just hang on to them. Well, I think we're getting to the time where we're going to dive into some Q&A, if that's cool. If you guys are prepared with your questions, now what is the process for this? Oh, we're going to take a microphone back. Oh no, she has another one. Unlimited microphone budget on this show. This is awesome. Just give everybody in the crowd their own microphone. It's going to be a valuable time saver. Pardon me? Right. So you have one for each side. So if you put your hand up, I will run. We'll kind of direct. Well, I was going to give you this one because I won't be needing one anymore. You hang on to yours. That way we're not sharing germs and God knows what. Cross-border viral pollinations. All right. So just shoot your hand up if you have a question. Be sad if nobody has any questions at all. Right in the back, there's a double hander all the way back.
Yeah, I got a mic too.
You brought your own mic? Very forward thinking.
Experience. I was just wondering what the panel thinks about the role of the C story in more like comedy drama situations, where maybe the C story provides some comic relief, but maybe it also could provide some, other functions towards the story. I'm talking mostly about half-hour shows still.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's the ideal episode, or I would say for us, is if at least there's 2 stories that intertwine and are really funny, and then if suddenly when you're laughing you get to that emotional point where it really rings true or touches you, or thinking back to the very first Simpsons when they got a dog for Christmas, and it really turned out to be a great present. This dog Homer had picked up for nothing over at the Greyhound Park. That's the best, and unfortunately we don't do it every episode, but that's always what we're striving for in the end.
I'm curious, when you're talking about half-hour kind of drama comedies, what would be an example of that? Just so Entourage. Gotcha. I'm going to step out of the light a little bit so I can see the audience a little bit better. Who has another question? I felt like I was going into a mock pit. Question right here. Yes, sir. Here comes the microphone.
Hi, I have a question for Al Jane. So normally in Simpson, there's always different writing jokes that goes on throughout an episode, and often sometimes it happens like Alberto happens like throughout different seasons. Would you call them runner?
Yeah, I would, and it's the great thing about having a show where there's such a fully realized universe. It's like you have them going into a department store where we already have a name for it and a character for it. And one example I always give is that Principal Skinner, one episode, he just said he was a Vietnam veteran, and we thought, oh my God, that's a great thing to open up for him. Now I think it makes him way too old for who he's playing. But at the time, it was just, with these things, we don't have Bibles, we don't plan these things organically. But if somebody pitches a really great character trait, it definitely just becomes part of the canon, and we use it all the time.
While we're waiting for the next question, you bring up Bibles here. How important do you guys feel Bibles are to the beginning process of a show?
Well, I think absolutely Satan is the original sea runner. What would be the sea runner of the Bible, Al? It starts out as the A story, then it only pops up a few times, right?
Some would say it's no gay marriage, but I haven't found it in there.
Yeah, my question's for Brent Butt. It's less to do with sea stories. I noticed that in Corner Gas you. Yes, actually, but my first question before that is you wore a lot of hats in Corner Gas. You wrote and you produced it and you acted in it, and Oh, thank you. How did that affect for you the writing process, and also how did that? Did you have to learn new skills, and did you find you spent a lot of time just like learning things? And going?
Prior to Corner Gas, I hadn't. Thank you, young man. Prior to Corner Gas, I hadn't put any half-hour scripts together. I'd just never done it before. So while I had written the treatment for the show and everything, I had to learn how to write half-hour television. And I hired guys who had written half-hour television. And, Mark Farrell was the first guy. He's an old stand-up friend of mine. So when I got this opportunity with Corner Gas, I contacted him, and he and I wrote the first 2 scripts together. So I was learning, I learned everything on Corner Gas. Everything I know about television, aside from how to turn one on, I learned at Corner Gas. But what we learned, because getting back to your wearing a lot of hats question, we just learned just pragmatically that we should all, because when you have a writing room, you all do write together. Somebody creates a script, but at the end of the day, everybody weighs in and helps shape it. We would just make sure we tried to get all my scripts done before we went to camera, because then that really got, my heavy lifting was done, so I could concentrate more on being on set and doing whatever I had to do there, and then it would just be a case of scripts coming in and kind of tweaking and writing jokes. But so that's the answer to the question. To try to front load, get all my heavy lifting before we go to camera.
Thank you very much.
Another question over here, up in this corner.
Yeah, I guess this is for Chris and Al, but not to exclude Mr. Butt. But I'm wondering if you guys could give me an example, or if in the sea story, you can kind of bring out your weirdest characters, like you bring out the nanoparticle bit you had, or like just something weird that you thought about with your friend. I'm wondering if that's something that you guys practice in the writer's room, like just bring out the weird stuff when it's time for the sea story, like just the really kind of risky one.
Well, that's why I agree. I mean, oftentimes, I think the less grounded, the more absurd characters who exist on the fringes of the storyline of the world, sea stories are kind of made for them sometimes. Like a Ken Jeong character, Chang. We created a season runner with him in season 3, where he started out as a lowly security guard, started out as a guy living in the air vents, got hired as a security guard, made his way to head security guard. Then he became this little fascist leader with his own child army, who then took over the school. Yeah, all that played as little bits and pieces sprinkled throughout, because as we learned early on, a little Chang goes a long way, and a little of those absurd characters go a long way. You want to just sprinkle them throughout, and sometimes Sea Runner is the perfect avenue for doing that.
Yeah, similarly, when the comic book guy first appeared, I couldn't believe that we actually had a character on a show who was a fat comic book seller that everybody hated. Like, if you had tried to pitch that as a sitcom back in 1991, they would have thrown you right out. But, he was really popular, and we've now done, we're pitching just now a main story about him. And I think that's it. I think, one that struck me was even, Frasier, when he first appeared on Cheers, I didn't love the character, and then, now I think it's one of the greatest characters ever, and I love the show Frasier. But I think sometimes it's just, in TV, you got to, wean somebody on slowly, and then, they can turn out to be incredibly popular if you just, you give them a right minimal use at the beginning.
I mean, I have a question for you now, though. Like, I mean, because The Simpsons, so many of them, it seems like you guys did such an incredible job early on of going, this is the one-line joke of this side character, comic book guy, even like the cop, even Mo. Like, now, when you are doing over 20 years with them, you have to suddenly like have a comic book guy a story, and then you have to therefore dimensionalize them. Do you feel that somehow makes it a richer comic character, or do you feel sometimes like, oh, now he's too human, he can't just be the Statler and Waldorf like making jokes on the sidelines?
No, I like doing it. I like doing it because you explore odd things, and you just get to get crazier as you explore these things about the characters. One thing I like doing, although it doesn't sound like a joke, is that we had never given him a name, and then during our Super Bowl episode, which was like highest rated, we just had comic book guys say, "Oh, by the way, my name is Jeff Albertson," which is just a normal name, and it was just like designed to aggravate everybody, because he would have a name like that, and that's the kind
I'm
of thing.
so glad his name wasn't like Charles Bookington, like so it was CBG, the same initials somehow.
No, in movies, people are always like Jim Dash, the handsome man. Like,
Yeah.
When have you ever met someone whose name was what they were? It never happens. Except I am wearing jeans, but.
Fraser, I just wanted to say, maybe as people who are inside the Hollywood showbiz scene, I've heard that the Fraser character kind of was brought to the forefront because the writers didn't care much for Shelley Long, and Shelley Long was trying to get them to ditch the Fraser character, so they kept writing him in more and more. Is there any truth to that? Have you heard any truth to that?
I know some of those guys, and I don't know that as a fact, but I would believe it from what I heard. That they really loved Kelsey, and that she was kind of difficult from what I heard.
Yes, just to help me better understand what the Sea Story is, I'm thinking back to the movies, the Pink Panther movies, and you know how he would always fight with Kato, and he would always have these sessions with his boss, but then he would always be solving a crime. So in that scenario, can you identify for me which would be the A, B, and C plot? I can make a good guess, but I don't know if you're able to do that for me. And secondly, is the C plot something you might use to try to push people when they're already laughing over the edge to the point where they get that unstoppable laugh going?
Well, if I could use Chris's example, I think that's a perfect one. The main story of Clouseau trying to find the jewel, nobody gives a damn. Like, I've got to get this jewel back from a rich guy who doesn't need it. And it's the Kato stuff that's funny, and the insane stuff. It's just like that community clip. That's what you're actually very interested in.
It's usually, I feel like oftentimes the C runner is usually used, therefore, as the blow to scenes. Like, you'll be getting the plot done with either the A or the B story, and then somehow the C runner will be like, oh, yeah, Chang, this is where, Chang is morphed with a fly, and he's turning into a fly, and that's the blow to the scene. So, yeah, in that iteration, I absolutely think that it's so well. The C runner is so great because oftentimes it's a one funny idea that you can keep coming back to and using usually as blows to scenes.
I would say Kato is maybe the C and the inspector is the B, and that the theoretical story that you're following, even though that's the least important, is the A. But even there are things that aren't even like stories. It's, one of the best jokes ever was he was looking in some cold cream and he stuck his nose in and he had a perfect white dot. And so he spent the next 10 minutes with this white dot on his nose, and it was hilarious. And I have no idea what he was talking about or what he was doing. All I cared about was that cold cream on his nose. And he had that perfect dignity as he was doing it.
And the second part of my question, do you use it to push people? You've already got them laughing, and you want to really throw the killer punch. Is that what you use the C line for?
If you've got those weapons, if you've got like something that then you can throw in that tops it, there was a movie 1, 2, 3 with Billy Wilder, and it was set in Germany after the war, and they kept having a running thing about what did you do during the war, and there was like a bad guy who was running someplace, and then it turned out he had been an SS guy, and so they got a huge laugh because it had been set up where everybody was hiding everything, if I'm telling this correctly, and that was a case where a movie was so perfectly constructed that when you saw this, you were just dying because it was so funny and you knew, just what was going on.
A question right here in the front.
Yeah, this is for Al, I guess, more because of the longevity of The Simpsons, compared to like Archie Bunker, which had a lot of spin-offs, and Mary Tyler Moore, which had a lot of spin-offs, where the C characters become so strong. How come The Simpsons have never sort of taken that model and have spin-offs and have people have their own show like Mo or whoever?
Well, there's usually two examples, like Archie Bunker, which was the Alden Family was one of the greatest shows that ever was, but then when it spun off and he wasn't racist and he was liberal and he had a bar and a little girl, like it was terrible. So we never wanted to do that. We've made fun of that kind of thing. Mary Tyler Moore, they definitely ended, at a peak, and they were just great from beginning to end. I think the actors wanted their own shows, wanted their own, starring vehicles. We've been lucky that I think everybody just loves doing The Simpsons, and they've been able to try other stuff live action. But it's not like, Mo goes, I've got to do the Mo show, because those things almost always fail anyways. You see, Flo from Alice, Fish from Barney Miller, to use older examples. They're the best character on a show, but then when they try doing it by themselves, it rarely works.
I'm trying to think of a recent spin-off situation. There aren't many anymore, are there? I think because, like you said, historically they haven't worked very well. Joey from Friends.
Yeah. I mean, Mindy's a little bit like that, where it's sort of this person that you liked on The Office, and you're, I think, sort of thinking it's the same,
Yeah, I mean, it's Mindy Kaling, who is a giant personality. She's definitely created her own persona that's different from Kelly Kapoor on The Office. And in animation, all I can think of recently is the Cleveland Show off of Family Guy was that was a spinoff.
Another question right over here.
Yeah. So a question for all you guys. Can you guys think of any examples in your shows or other shows where there's been a C runner that's been in the background for the whole duration, then at the end of the show kind of comes to the foreground and maybe clashes with the A or even kind of takes over?
I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head, but I know that oftentimes our tag was just kind of the button on the C story, so that kind of at the end of the third act, the A and the B story would both be resolved, sometimes dovetail together nicely, and then you come back from that final commercial break, for a little 30-second tag or something, and it would just be kind of the button to the C story. I know, personally speaking, we rarely tied any runner that we had to any kind of culmination of the A and B story. I don't know about you guys.
The only example I can think of that has nothing to do with TV is just like in Robin Hood, the way they were always talking about the king, and you never really heard that he was coming back, and then suddenly he appears at the end and loves Robin Hood, and I go, that kind of structure works sometimes, where there's just completely unsuspected good character that comes and saves everybody.
Yeah, it's also called Deus Ex Machina, I guess, in that sense.
But
I'm trying to think of one. I mean, sometimes, I guess sometimes, and I can't think of a specific example, but it seems like a sea runner where it's building towards some sort of comedic disaster in the background, somehow affecting. But I can't think of anything specific at the moment.
I know that on Corner Gas, we often used my character, who was, essentially the number one in the show, was often not involved in the A or the B storyline. I think it was kind of unique in that way. There were plenty of cases over the 107 episodes where he was, but there were almost as many where my character was just kind of he had something peripheral going on, and he was kind of the character that would drift through the other storylines and would kind of, the fact that he just had a chat with somebody about their storyline, I could go from the diner to the coffee shop and be involved in their storyline, and I could be used almost as a tool to transfer information or to dovetail stories together. So I know that I was kind of the C guy a lot of times, because I could drift, because my character was kind of ubiquitous, I could drift through all the scenes. It made sense for me to be almost anywhere. Right here? Hi, guys. Is it live?
I think it's live. It is now. Thanks for being here. Congratulations on your success. Chris, nerd of the nerds, very well done. I was curious just to compare and contrast American and Canadian TV writing staffs, if you could give us an idea of how many people are on each of your shows. And a quick follow-up that is unrelated. If you weren't writing for the great shows that you've written for and love so dearly, you can tell, what else would you like to be writing for, or who would you like to work with that you've met in your travels?
Well, if we go to the writing room question first, we started season 1 with 13 episodes, and we all kind of thought that was going to be it. We all, Canadian sitcoms don't have a long, glorious track record. The notion of a Canadian sitcom isn't something that automatically springs to mind. Hit. So we thought somehow we convinced them to do 13 episodes. This is all going to be over, and we'll go back to our real life. So it was a small, I think it was 4. I think it was four of us. And then once we got picked up and going, and realized we're going to have to churn out a few more episodes in a smaller amount of time. Then we went to I want to say 6. It was 5 for sure, and we had a very funny guy named Dylan Wirtz who was a local guy in Regina that we hired to kind of be the story department coordinator. And so his job is to kind of sit in the room while you're all kicking around ideas and trying to make things work and contribute jokes. And he, after he was in it a while, he was the guy going, well, what if so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that? And you go, yeah, that's actually perfect. Yeah, that's great. So then we invited him, after a few examples of that, we invited him to be a full-time writer, and I hired him to write full-time on Hiccups as well. So, but I think I would say 5 full-time writers is what we had.
Yeah, we have 20.
I meant to say 20. We had 21 writers.
This is why America's going broke. We have people who are really great, and we have as I've run the show over 12 years, I've really tried not to let anybody go. So when we had a budget cut, we all just took a percentage cut, and were able to keep everybody. Certain people have left to go on and do other things. And it is an anomaly. I mean, it's a really huge staff.
I'm sorry, how big is the writing staff? On Community was about I'd say about 10 or 11, 12 writers, some teams. We're on a really small staff right now. I'm on a show called The Mini Project, and I would say it's about 7 or 8 writers. And I think Mindy's philosophy is great, which is I think she wants to keep her writer's room very small and tight, and off of the idea that the more people you have, the more people feel that they can sort of check out and watch their iPhone all day. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. Everyone is engaged, and we are working very hard all day. And another thing she does, which I really think is great, is we have all the screens in front of us, and writer's assistants are taking notes. But if you're going to write something, the keyboard goes to you, and you sit there and you write on the keyboard. And I think it's really engaging writer's room. It's really great to work that way. Some people, another writer's room work other ways, and they're great. But I really like the idea of having control and being on the keyboard and writing the scenes rather than just dictating to a writer's assistant. I think is actually very engaging.
Have you ever projected the script up on the?
I know writers' rooms do that. I haven't done that. How do you guys work?
We do. We have a screen.
I think it works great. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I felt like the old grandpa fuddy-duddy who was like, how the deuce did you get it up on the wall? It was the young guy that I was talking about, Dylan Wirtz, who he said, well, you can just hook this up to a projector. And if you have 6 or 7 people trying to solve an issue, instead of all being huddled around one small thing, it's just a way for everybody to kind of sit back. It's the exact same process, but it's very, I find it just physically works really well. We just project it up on a whiteboard somewhere, and you see the changes being made as the person's putting them in, and very effective. You had a second part of the question. Well,
I was just curious if there was something else you could ever write for an existing show or an old show. Who would you like to work with, or what would you like to do?
Breaking Bad. As a comedy writer, it's funny. I don't know about you, Al, but I find myself watching so much drama. Even though there's great comedies out there, even in great new comedies I love Archer, I love the Venture Brothers, I find them fantastic. I find myself watching Game of Thrones, I find myself watching Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad, I find, like some of the great dramas of the last 10 years, they do comedy sometimes better than comedies. I feel like there's such a wit in The Sopranos. Harder laughs to get from The Sopranos, harder laughs to get in Mad Men, harder laughs to get in Breaking Bad from so many other comedies. And but particular Breaking Bad, I find they do a level of tension and cut it in a very smart way, and do great character work, which is often extremely, I find, comedic.
Yeah, I think the best script work the last 20 years were Sopranos and Mad Men. I can't believe how good each of those shows are or was. You know, it's just it's the gold standard.
For me, I think I would, if I was to go on to another project right away and I could just call my shot, I would take a break from narrative, and I'd like to get into a situation where I was gag writing, like for Letterman or Jimmy Kimmel or something like that, where I could take a break from worrying about how to make A fit with B, and I mean, because it really is. There's no getting around it. That's hard. It's hard work. People would always say, "How do you guys consistently make the show funny?" And I would say, "Funny is the least of our worries, right? It's always how do you make the show make sense over half an hour. That's the hard part." And for me, anyway, that's the really pushing the ball uphill. So I would leap at the opportunity to get away from narrative writing and just gag writing, top 10 list stuff. I would love to do that for a while.
We just did a short that starring Maggie, a silent short that appeared before Ice Age. And that was really fun. It was like writing for Buster Keaton or something. And
Oh, yeah.
Like I thought, oh, we'd love to do a two-reeler.
That's
That would
awesome.
be my ambition. It was just physical jokes, and the director David Silverman was great.
What was the time limit on it?
Well, originally the budget was like 1 minute, and we're going like a 1 minute movie. How can you do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we had enough stuff that they finally said, look, we'll pay for 4 minutes, and it was just wonderful thing to do.
I'm sorry, and it's a Maggie, like
Maggie
silent
short.
film?
Yeah,
Oh my
she
God,
goes,
that's great. I didn't know about this.
Adrian Daycare Center, and this bully baby is killing butterflies, and she tries to save a little butterfly. The unibrow baby is the villain, yeah. Yeah, there's no dialogue.
Fantastic. That
Yeah.
must have been so much fun. I got to
It
go check
was.
that out. That's in front of Ice Age?
Yeah, and we're going to show it sometime during the season too. But yeah, it was just totally a joy to do.
Speaking of a different medium, recently we took a little break at the writer's room mini project, which is on the Universal lot. We went up and we rode the Simpsons ride, which most of us had never been on, which obviously you and Warburton and all these guys had worked. That is absolutely fantastic.
That was another wonderful thing that I never thought I'd do in my life.
Unbelievable. If you guys, it was one of these things where I didn't know what to expect, and right when you get in line, you're like, oh, these are great. You're standing in line and you're being pelted by amazing Simpsons jokes right around you, and then you get on the ride, and it's an incredible ride and hilarious at the same time.
Yeah,
and
Warburton worked really hard on it. I worked on it too, but yeah,
I
it
was
a
so
wonderful
impressed.
experience.
Anyway,
Thank
if you want to like spend sort of a visceral experience inside in the mind of a Simpsons writer, go on the Simpsons ride at Universal. It's fantastic.
And it works really well as a ride too. Like
Absolutely. And it's in Sensorama
Yeah.
or Smellorama.
It is.
There's smells on it. It's amazing.
As wonderful as it might be to be in my mind, it's really a great ride.
Okay, so one small question is the gag reel. Sorry, the microphone gag that has been going on tonight. Is that a C line or an A? Or an A?
Skyping about it.
Sort of an F minus.
Yes. And it kind of it's a good example of what a C runner is, right?
Or how one cannot work very well.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
Also without an end.
And then.
But maybe this is the heartwarming finish.
And you guys have been. Yeah. So you've also, I mean, a show like The Simpsons, you've been doing that for a really long time, and Community has been going on for a while too. Maybe not as long, but.
3 years. They just started their 4th season.
Okay, but
I'm not there.
That's a while. Okay. Okay. Well, how do you keep it interesting for yourself to be writing, because you're constantly working with the same characters and trying to find new ways?
Leave.
Okay,
And
that works.
And my answer is stay.
So how do you?
Did you guys were the hours long at Community?
You know they were.
Okay.
There were some long hours. I may have showed up on a Monday morning and left Wednesday evening. Yeah, maybe. How about you guys have it, though, at this point? It's got to be, you guys show up at 10, you're done by 10:30 a.m., right?
No, it's more 10 to 9 for the writers, but and then I go a little later editing and stuff. But no, honestly, and I don't mean to pick on Community, because different shows run differently, and it has had great results. But my theory is like you can't burn people out because then they do leave. I've been at jobs where like I've been, just so exhausted after like 13 episodes, you start going, there's better things to life, and some of the great shows like Cheers, I know, was on a very regular schedule. It wasn't light, but it wasn't impossible. Seinfeld, I think, too, they worked 6 days a week, but they didn't have late nights. And I think one secret of these shows that, really last long might be that they sort of pace themselves. Because it really, it's a cliche, but it's a marathon.
It's tough. It's one of those things where, the hours can be very long. And now that I'm a new father, you go, oh, maybe I couldn't have done that again. But some of my favorite shows have had like these cockamamie hours. Like News Radio is one of my all-time favorite shows, and you hear like the way Paul Sims would run it, be like, "Oh, come back at 1 a.m. and then we'll start breaking a story. I'm going to play the guitar for 14 hours," and you go, "Okay." But I love the output. I love that show so much. Community, it was bananas at times, and we had. Though it was my favorite show that it's one of my favorite shows of all time. So.
Another question right here.
Oh yeah, just a quick one. I was just wondering if you could clarify what the difference between a sea runner and a callback joke is, or are they always the same thing?
Well, a callback generally just does that, just calls back an earlier gag or an earlier situation. It tends to, in my mind anyway, maybe I have a different idea of it. The callback is kind of a one-off. The joke is there, you call it back again one time. If you start doing it more than one, I think that's the point it becomes a runner.
Okay.
Yeah, when I started at The Simpsons, Sam Simon said we don't do callbacks, and I think it was a pretty good point. Like, there has to be something that the second use of it really brings that's different. Otherwise, you're just kind of being lazy. You're just going, oh, I'm not going to think of a fresh thing. And we're guilty of it. We've done it, but you try to really avoid just doing the same when I see shows do it, I go, oh, it seems kind of. Like maybe those 70s shows in front of a live audience, they could just say the same thing again and again, and the audience would just go wild. And
Macarena!
Yeah.
Woo! Remember we said that in the first act? I agree.
Actually,
sometimes
they work
it's
pretty
a
well.
sign of it's lazy writing because you're like, cracked us up. And I think they're really like, I think Nakamura was like probably not even it was like the idea. It was like, oh, these lazy writers who've made the same joke and they've just spread that peanut butter so thin over a piece of bread for.
But more
30 minutes.
specifically, like about the floppy hand clip that you showed us with Homer, what separates that from being like a callback, and what makes that a sea runner?
Well, at least in its defense, we try to do a different thing with it each time. One time we were trying to think of all the different uses a man with super long fingers could have, and when we reached the limits of our imagination, 3, we concluded in utter triumph. The year was good.
Anyway, and for some reason, I just remembered one of my favorite callback, runners. It was a series runner, as Dan Harmon said. It was an Easter egg that took 3 seasons to hide. And I think that he said accessible when he tweeted it, but it's very true. It was the Beetlejuice joke. I don't know if you guys ever remember this, but in my first episode, first season, we made a joke where someone was trying to remember Britta's name, and basically was like, Britta, bitter, Beetlejuice. And then the second season, in the bottle episode, the Lost Pen episode, someone basically refers to Jeff's underwear as his striped underwear as Beetlejuice underwear. And then we were going to have another Beetlejuice joke. Apparently, I think in the third season, the United Nations episode, and Megan Gans, community nerd of all time, goes, "Wait, this will be the third time we said Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice has to show up." And so at that point, we did not mention it in United Nations. We saved it for Halloween, and Alison Brie says Beetlejuice when she's looking at the playlist. Oh, you have the Beetlejuice soundtrack, and behind her, Beetlejuice shows up and walks by. This is why I'm no longer on Community. This is why Dan Harmon and the rest of us got kicked off, because who the hell is watching that show?
No, but that's incredible ambition to do that over the course of 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely, and we stumbled into it. And
We have another question here. We only have a few minutes left, so we'll do 2 more questions. Yours and one more, sir.
Great.
Yeah, so this one's for Brent, slightly off topic. I'm just curious. We've seen TV shows go on and do a movie. Trailer Park Boys have done a couple. Simpsons, obviously. Wondering if you ever approached or attempted to do one for Corner Gas after you wrapped it up.
Well, I did the Simpsons movie. That was my contribute to the thing. No, it's something I've always been up front saying I like the idea of doing it, and I imagine at some point I can see it coming together because I like the idea. Everybody that has to approve of the idea seems to think it's a good idea. So I would be surprised if at some point it doesn't happen. Prior to thinking about the Corner Gas movie, I started writing another movie, which next month we go to filming on. It's called No Clue, and we're going to film for a month, then there'll be post-production, then smarter people than me will figure out what to do with it. So I wouldn't be able to start putting my mind really towards the Corner Gas movie till, maybe a year from now, but I like the idea of doing it.
I think I have the last one. This question is for Chris, and we haven't talked too much about it, but I have seen the first episode of the Mindy Project, and because we have you here and can pick your brain about it, I think it's the only one that's aired, right? Correct?
Yeah, we have the second episode airs next Tuesday.
It's a little unconventional, considering what else we've been talking about, because it's so strongly centered around Mindy's character. It's not really ensemble, at least not yet. Who knows? I mean, we don't. But to pick apart the storylines to determine A, B, C from the pilot episode, I was thinking, are they guys? Is it like each guy is the A or the B or the C, or I couldn't determine. So I guess want to know or want a hint of where the C is going to come from.
That's a great question. The pilot is the pilot. The pilot, I think, is going to be different. The pilot, in a lot of ways, is a sales tool of going, okay, and it's Mindy definitely front and center like she is on the show, but it's not so much about a workplace ensemble, which I think definitely starts coming into it, episode 2. But the show feels like almost like a mini romantic comedy in a lot of ways, and there's going to be elements about that in the series, but it's not going to be that week to week in terms of a redux of the pilot. To that, there's definitely going to be more of like a workplace ensemble. There's great other characters that really start filling in and supporting her. In terms of what the C story, what's that?
Anna Camp.
Anna Camp and Zoe Jarman and Amanda Sutton and little comedy weapon called Ike Barinholtz. I don't know if any of you know him, but he comes in episode 2 and is fantastic. But in terms of the sea runner in this, since we have to talk about sea runners. In the pilot, it's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, maybe her relationship with Chris Messina would be a sea runner. What I like about runners is, for me, I think everything should be a story. Everything should have a beginning, middle, and end, even if it's a sea runner. And I think they get a little place by the end of that. By the end of their little interaction, it starts off antagonistic, it gets very antagonistic, and by the end, there's a little bit of bonding. He's not in a ton. You'll see him a lot more in the show because he really is one of the leads of the show. But yeah, I would say maybe her relationship with him is something that's not only a sea runner but could also lend itself to being a down the road a sort of a Sam and Diane relationship, two very opposites who come together. We'll see.
Well, on behalf of everybody who's here tonight, I know this has been a rare opportunity to sit down with two people who are out there getting it done at very high levels. So our gratitude, big round of applause to Al and Chris for making the trek all the way to Vancouver, Canada. And thank you all for coming out, and enjoy the rest of the festival.